I got a statement though about all this. Whenever a teacher begins a sentence with research has shown, and then whatever they follow up with, we're having the right impact on public education because what we should be embracing is not just the science of, reading as it's come to be dubbed, even though it's really more like the science of how people learn to read. It would be far more accurate to the truth of what it is. I like it. I like that we're doing this. I don't like Marie Clay and all these people, Lucy Culkins and the crap. I don't like those people. To some of their credit, some of them are actually starting to realize, hey, we fucked up, and good that I did. It really, I know. I mean, it has to be quite awkward to think you may have done wrong by children, But I guess the way that I look at that, I'm like, you know what, suck it up, and I don't mean to be harsh. I really don't. I'm just what I'm trying to say is so awkward and so difficult to say, and especially to try to be tactful about it. But when we know better, we do better. And I would hope that would be the reality. That we would embrace in situations like that. I mean, if you have done harm to them, own it. Just own it. Admit it, and then once you're done with it, release it, and know that when we know better, we do better. And that's how I would embrace it as far as the science of reading and such. As far, you know, I know that it can be distressful and not problematic, but exhausting to teach phonics to children. Believe me, I am not without empathy for the person who has to do the job. But it needs to be done. They need to be pretty strongly bombarded by it early on. If they're going to learn to read, if a teacher is going to teach these kids to read, that's what the research was showing. At that point, and I love it whenever I see a video where a teacher's sentence begins with "research has shown that," everything, because that's beautiful. That's what needs to happen. We need to align curriculum with science, and that's my advocacy. Is that academia do what the scientists are revealing, or now I'm not saying scientists necessarily know how to tell them how to do their jobs, but to implement the findings of science, to align their curriculum to be more consistent with the science. I'm not trying to trample on teachers, and tell them how to do their jobs and such, but I can tell you that this is something that I'm facing. I've read blog after blog after blog of language personnel telling me that if you're going to learn a language, it's not a good approach to the problem to be unwilling to make mistakes because we learn through being corrected by somebody else when we make a mistake at speaking that language. And it just frustrates me to realize the things that I'm realizing about it all, because it's like teachers, by experience and dialogue with them in those classrooms, it's like you don't go into that unless you want to enable people's dreams and such. But I gotta say, it's like we're all paying, to be there and such. In college, we're not disengaged students that don't want to really learn the underlying material, or don't want to engage with it, or don't want to put the work in and everything. It wouldn't make sense to pay to be there in the first place unless you wanted to actually learn, and so it really frustrates me that they do this, that they still think that they need this grading shit, because I mean, this is shit that teachers embrace because they think they need gold stars and grades and all that other stuff to motivate students to do the work, to put in the work. And at this point, I don't really need gold stars. I don't need, 100% on papers or any of that shit. I just need instruction, teaching to be taught, and that's why I'm using Khan Academy. I've gone over to learning in that manner, and I get to learn at my own pace, which is much better than, being stuck through this shit for what, how long it's going to take with their system. It's all of 3 weeks in reality. 3 weeks in class. Like I said, I went over it. Mentally, let's think about this. If PCCA testifies that the typical term is 11 weeks, that means that we take 7 times 11 for 77 days. Only we can chop off we can chop off a good 30 because of the fact that they're only open 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. So that's 3 days a week we can just chop off right off the bat, so that's, you get to remove 30 from them, 33 out of that 77, and then you get to take another 22 because the fact of the matter is that math classes are only 2 days a week. So by now you've removed a good 5 days of the week from every single week, and that means that it's 22 days in total. Out of those days, out of the time that we spend on those days, it's about 2 hours, between 1 and 2 hours in math class. So really, as it goes out, it amounts to about 22 hours being spent in the actual course in the classroom. That's about as much time as you're actually going to get in it with an instructor and everything else. All in all, over the entire semester of the fucking course, which means there's no room left over at all to run into students that struggle at all to get through things. There's none. There's no give. You don't get review sessions. They don't go and, you bomb a test and they decide that they're gonna, alter their teaching plans as a consequence. They don't do that. There's no review. There's no, I see a lot of you are having these problems and everything, and so we're gonna hold a special day today, to go over this and to go over where you made your mistakes, and so that you can see how to fix some of the mistakes that I see on your papers. No, none of that. None of that. So it's like they diagnose problems even on test, and then do they fix the mistakes? No, they just move on to the next fucking, lesson. And so this is a broken system, if in order to really master math, you can't just move on, when you don't understand a piece, because, we all know that this is just not a great way of building the skills going forward in a forward-thinking manner, In essence, we're going to be moving into higher mathematics potentially after it. It doesn't make sense in a forward-thinking fashion to regard algebra in that kind of regard, with this whole just, what I'm trying to say is, to think of it as just getting through the course and nothing more, to have this kind of bad attitude towards it, because it does unlock and everything, and the problem is that a lot of people, they don't really learn it. They kind of commit it to short-term memory, as they go through things. They don't, they don't really master this stuff. It's total commitment to, short-term memory, and then they forget it promptly because they never use it outside of class. And, the thing is that I'm thinking I probably will use it if I'm going to be using an oscilloscope and, engaging in an electrical work and such. At that point, I'm probably going to have that sort of stuff to do the kinds of electrical work that I want to do. And so it really fundamentally frustrates me, to think that this is going to be the way that I have to go in regard to circuits, because it just, that sucks and all. And so, I haven't really, I guess, gotten a lot of sleep, I guess, today, but yeah, So I'm feeling that little mix, but the disillusionment I'm feeling with it is, how do they expect us to learn if every single one of our mistakes is harped on to the point in which our papers are chock full of red marks for deducted points, and we know that we're not getting that credit that we were originally eligible for when the course started? If this is the consequence of making a mistake, who's going to take a risk? Really? I mean, who taught these people how to teach is the question that I'm asking. I'm not asking, you know, does this person know how to do their job? I'm asking a fundamentally different question. Who taught this person how to teach? Because they didn't do a good job of it.